folder hit the dining table so hard that the water glasses rattled. Reeve Alderton, 41-year-old Chief Financial Officer of Alderton Crestwood Properties, did not look at his wife when he threw it. He looked past her, the way he had been looking past her for the better part of 2 years. His jaw was set. His cufflinks caught the light from the chandelier above the formal dining table they had chosen together at a shop on King Street West, back when choosing furniture together had still meant something. "I want you to explain every single line," he said. Lane Alderton, 37-year-old director of the Crestwood Community Housing Trust and wife of Reeve, stood at the far end of the table with her hands at her sides. She looked at the folder. She recognized the tabs along the edge. Those were her tabs. That was her handwriting on the label. Someone had gone through her office. She did not reach for it. "I'm not going to explain anything while you're speaking to me like this," she said. Reeve pulled out a chair and sat down, not the way a man sits when he intends to have a conversation, but the way a man sits when he has already decided how the conversation ends. He opened the folder himself. He turned it so the pages faced her across the length of the table. "The trust received 3 capital transfers in the last 14 months that don't align with any donor disclosure you filed. A total of $4.8 million, Lane, routed through a numbered company out of Alberta." He paused. "The auditors found it this morning." She looked at the papers from where she stood. "I know," she said. The word landed in the room like something breakable hitting a stone floor. Reeve's face shifted. He had expected denial. He had prepared himself for tears, for deflection, for the particular tight-lipped silence she used when she felt cornered. He had not prepared for that. "You know," he repeated. "I know about the transfers," she said. "I've known for 11 months. He stared at her. She finally walked to the table. She did not sit. She stood across from him and placed her hands flat on the wood and looked at him directly in the way she had stopped allowing herself to do for a long time. Because looking at him directly these days required acknowledging too many things she wasn't ready to name. "Those transfers didn't come from the trust," she said. "They came into the trust. There's a difference, Reeve. Someone routed money through us. Someone used the trust's reporting structure as a pass-through. Whoever did it had access to our internal account codes, our filing calendar, and our donor classification system." She paused. "Not many people have all 3. He was quiet for a long time. "And you said nothing," he finally said. "I was building a record." The dining room felt very still after that. Outside, through the tall windows that faced the back garden, the maple tree was dropping its last leaves. It was October in Toronto, and the light came in at a low angle that made everything look slightly more serious than it already was. Reeve closed the folder. "The board is going to vote to place you on administrative leave pending investigation," he said. "That's not coming from me. That's already in motion." She looked at him. "Did you tell them to start that process?" He did not answer. She picked up the folder from the table, turned, and walked upstairs. She had married Reeve Alderton 9 years ago in a ceremony at a property his family owned on the Niagara Escarpment, the kind of venue where you could see Lake Ontario on a clear day, and the caterers brought their own generators. She had been 28. He had been 32, and already running the financial division of Alderton Crestwood, which his grandfather had founded, and which his father had turned from a regional contractor into one of the 3 largest private real estate development groups in Ontario. She had not come from money. She had grown up in Sudbury, the daughter of a retired schoolteacher and a woman who ran a small bookkeeping firm from their house. She had gone to Queen's on scholarship, done her MBA at Rotman, and had been hired by Alderton Crestwood's charitable arm at 26. That was how she met Reeve. She had walked into a meeting to present a community impact analysis, and he had asked her 2 questions she hadn't expected, and then called her office the next day to discuss them further. For the first 5 years, she thought she had built something real. The trust had been her idea. She had proposed it to the board as a way to channel a percentage of Alderton Crestwood's development profits into affordable housing projects across the GTA. Reeve had supported it. His father, Bernard Alderton, had been skeptical, but had eventually agreed. The trust launched with a founding commitment of $20 million, and Lane had run it from the beginning, hiring a small staff, vetting partner organizations, building relationships with municipal housing authorities in Toronto, Mississauga, and Hamilton. She was good at it. She had always been good at the patient, unglamorous work of making systems function correctly. What she had not been good at was noticing the moment when someone in her marriage decided she had become inconvenient. She noticed it the way you notice most important things, not all at once, but slowly, in accumulation. The dinner where Reeve forgot to tell her his parents would be joining them until they were already at the door. The weekend trip to Montreal, where she discovered from his assistant rather than from him that a colleague named Darvish would be traveling with them. The gradual rerouting of conversations about the trust's finances from her inbox to a shared account that Reeve had access to. And then there was Philippa. Philippa Crane, 31 years old, had joined Alderton Crestwood's legal team 14 months ago. Lane had met her twice at company events. She was the kind of woman who stood very straight and smiled without showing her teeth and seemed to be calculating something whenever she was in a room. Lane had not thought much about her at first. People who worked in corporate legal were often a certain type. But then she found the hotel receipt from a conference in Calgary in March. Reeve had expensed 2 rooms. His assistant had sent the reconciliation to a shared account by mistake. The receipt showed a room booked for Philippa Crane for 3 nights, charged to Reeve's corporate card. Lane had printed the receipt and placed it in a folder. That was when she started keeping folders. The administrative leave notice came by email the following Tuesday. Lane read it at her desk in the trust office on Yonge Street, a 3rd-floor space with tall windows and exposed brick that she had chosen herself when they were looking for a permanent location. Assistant Ingvar knocked and opened the door, and she waved him in. "I've seen it," she said. Ingvar was 44, had worked with her for 6 years, and was one of perhaps 4 people in her professional life she trusted completely. He sat down across from her. "What do you want me to do?" he said. "Nothing yet," she said. "But pull the audit trail on our account code access logs for the last 18 months. Every login, every modification, every export it to an encrypted file and send it to this address." She wrote something on a sticky note and passed it across the desk. He looked at the address. It wasn't a Crestwood account. "Whose address is this?" he said. "Mine," she said. "My personal one." He nodded and stood up and left without asking anything further. That was why she kept Ingvar. She spent the rest of the afternoon at her desk going through the folder she had been building for 11 months. She had started it the week she first noticed the anomaly. A vendor payment logged against a trust project code for a contractor that, when she cross-referenced the registry, did not exist. Not an inactive company. Not a dissolved company. A company that had never existed. The registration number was fabricated. From there it had widened. She found 3 more phantom vendors over the following 2 months. She found evidence that someone had retroactively adjusted donor designation codes on 4 incoming transfers to reclassify them from restricted to unrestricted funds, which would have made them eligible for transfer out of the trust without triggering the board disclosure requirements. She found a pattern in the timing. The adjustments always happened on Friday afternoons, after 4:30 p.m., when the trust's compliance officer, a woman named Greta, was not in the building. And she found something else. The numbered company in Alberta, 2847193 Alberta Limited, which was the entity showing up in the auditor's initial review, had been incorporated 13 months ago. She had requested the incorporation documents through a contact at a provincial business registry. The registered agent was a firm in Edmonton she didn't recognize, but the secondary contact listed on the original filing, a field that rarely got filled in, a field that most people left blank, contained a name: Lionel Croft. Lane had gone very still when she saw that name. Lionel Croft, 58 years old, was Bernard Alderton's personal financial advisor and had been for nearly 20 years. He sat on no formal board, he had no public-facing role in Alderton Crestwood. But Lane had seen him at the Alderton family home in Rosedale more times than she could count, usually in the back study with Bernard, usually with the door closed. She had not yet figured out exactly what Lionel Croft's role was in what she was looking at, but she had been careful. She had said nothing. She had kept the folder and added to it and waited. And now Reeve had handed an incomplete version of the story to the board, and the board had used it to place her on leave. She understood now that the timing was not accidental. Her lawyer's name was Audrey Fenn. She was 52, ran a boutique firm on Bay Street, and had represented Lane on 2 previous trust-related legal matters involving municipal contracts. She was the kind of lawyer who read everything before she said anything, and when she did speak, she said it precisely and did not repeat herself. Lane met her at her office on a Wednesday morning and laid the folder on the table. Audrey spent 40 minutes reading. She did not interrupt. She turned pages without comment. She made 2 small marks in the margin with a pencil on items Lane expected her to mark, and 3 marks on items she did not. When she was finished, she closed the folder and set it down carefully. "You understand," she said, "that what you've built here is a defense, not an offense." "I know," Lane said. "This establishes that the anomalies were not initiated by you and that you had knowledge of them prior to the audit," Audrey said. "That's significant. But it doesn't tell us who did initiate them, not conclusively. The Lionel Croft connection gives us a thread, but a thread isn't a case." "I have more," Lane said. She pulled out her phone and opened an encrypted folder. She turned the screen toward Audrey. Ingvar pulled the account access logs. The The 4 instances where donor designation codes were retroactively modified. They were all executed under a single login credential. Not mine, not Greta's, not any active staff member. She paused. It's a dormant credential that was issued 14 months ago during a system migration. The credential was issued in the name of a contractor who worked on the migration for 6 weeks and then left. But someone kept the login active. And someone knew the password. Audrey looked at the screen for a long time. 14 months ago, she said slowly. 1 month after Philippa Crane joined the legal team, Lane said. And 2 weeks after she accompanied Reeve to a conference in Calgary. The room was quiet. Lane, Audrey said carefully. Have you spoken to anyone at Alderton Crestwood's parent holding structure? Not the subsidiary board. The holding company itself. Lane looked at her. Why? She said. Audrey hesitated in a way Lane had never seen her hesitate before. Is there something you're not telling me? Lane said. Audrey folded her hands on the table. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it honestly, regardless of what you think the answer means. All right? Did your father ever discuss his estate arrangements with you? Specifically in relation to any holding structures connected to the Crestwood family of companies? Lane was very still. My father died when I was 19, she said. He was an accountant. He had a savings account and a small insurance policy. There were no estate arrangements to discuss. Your biological father, Audrey said quietly. Lane did not move. What did you just say? She said. What followed was the kind of conversation that restructures everything that came before it. Audrey had not discovered it accidentally. It had come to her through a letter she had received 3 weeks ago from a notary in Victoria, British Columbia, forwarded as a professional notification because Lane had listed her as legal contact on a now-defunct document from 7 years earlier. Audrey had been trying to find the right moment to raise it. The timing, she said, had never felt right, and then the audit happened, and she realized the timing was not going to get better. The letter was from the estate of a man named Walter Goss Fenwith. Walter Goss Fenwith had died 6 weeks ago at the age of 74 at his home in Victoria. He had never married, he had no children on record. He had spent his professional life in private equity and had structured, over 4 decades, a holding company called Fenwith Capital Partners, which held minority and majority stakes in 17 companies across Western Canada, including a real estate investment trust with significant overlap in asset class with Alderton Crestwood. He had also, 38 years ago, had a relationship with a woman in Sudbury. The notary's letter was addressed to Lane. It explained that Walter Goss Fenwith had left a sealed document with the notary to be opened upon his death and forwarded to the individual named within. The sealed document had been in the notary's possession for 19 years. It contained a letter written by Walter Fenwith, a DNA analysis conducted voluntarily and privately in 2003, a legal opinion prepared by a Vancouver firm in 2004, confirming the validity of a biological connection, and a trust instrument executed in 2005 designating Lane as the sole beneficiary of a holding vehicle called the GF Family Trust. The GF Family Trust held a controlling interest in Fenwith Capital Partners. Fenwith Capital Partners, as of the most recent independent valuation attached to the notary's letter, had a net asset value of $2.3 billion. Lane sat in Audrey's office for a very long time without speaking. Outside, Bay Street moved through its ordinary morning. Couriers, taxis, the glass towers reflecting one another in the grey October light. He knew about me, Lane finally said. He knew, Audrey said. He had known since before you were born. From what the letter describes, he chose not to enter your life. He believed, based on conversations he'd had with your mother when you were very young, that disrupting the life she had built for you would cause more harm than good. She paused. The letter also says he followed your career. He knew about the trust. He knew about the work you were doing. Lane thought about her mother who had raised her alone from the age of 3 when Lane's father, the man she had always believed was her father, left. Who had never spoken about what happened before that, who had died of a stroke 7 years ago without ever saying a name. My mother never told me, Lane said. No, Audrey said. She didn't. Lane pressed her palms flat on her thighs and looked at the wall for a moment and then back at Audrey. Does anyone else know, she said. That's the question, Audrey said, because here's what I keep coming back to. The numbered company in Alberta was incorporated 13 months ago. 14 months ago is when Philippa Crane joins Alderton Crestwood's legal team. 19 years ago is when Walter Fenwith left the sealed document with the notary. 5 years ago is when the trust instrument was confirmed. She paused. Someone, somewhere did some research. You think someone knew about this before I did, Lane said. I think it's worth asking, Audrey said. How a dormant numbered company connected to your father-in-law's financial advisor ended up routing money through a trust that you run at a time when your marriage was deteriorating in a way that would result in an audit pointing at you. She let that sit. I think the question is whether what happened to the trust was opportunistic or whether it was planned. Lane had grown up believing that the patient accumulation of accurate information was the most effective tool available to a person who had no other leverage. Her mother had taught her that, not in so many words, but in the way she ran her bookkeeping clients, methodically, without drama, with a filing system so meticulous that she had once located a discrepancy from 11 years prior in a single afternoon. Lane had built the trust the same way. She had also, over the previous 11 months, built something else. She had not told Reeve about the dormant credential. She had not told Greta. She had not told the board. She had taken the access logs to Ingvar, and Ingvar had helped her secure them, and she had kept them in an encrypted folder on a personal device and in physical printout in a safety deposit box at a branch of her bank on Bloor Street. She had also, through a contact she had maintained from her Rotman days, who now worked in forensic accounting, had the phantom vendor registrations traced as far as they could be traced before she had enough to be confident about what she was looking at. The contact's name was Dex. He called her the Thursday after she met with Audrey. "The Alberta numbered company," he said without preamble. "It's a shelf. There are 3 layers. The second layer is a partnership registered in Manitoba. The third layer resolves to a holding vehicle incorporated in Cayman. The Cayman vehicle has 2 beneficial owners on record. I can only confirm one of them through documents I can access legitimately." A pause. "Lionel Croft. And the other one?" she said. "The other beneficial owner is listed as an individual with a date of birth that matches a person I'm not going to name on an open line," he said. "But the initials are R.A." She sat with that for a moment. "All right," she said. "Lane," he said. "This is not a situation where you want to wait much longer." "I know," she said. She hung up and sat at the kitchen table in the house on Elgin Avenue. The house she and Reeve had bought 4 years into their marriage. The house where she had planted a lilac bush in the backyard that Reeve always forgot to water. And she made a list. She made the list the way her mother would have made it. Methodically, without drama. The board meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. The agenda, as she understood it from Ingvar, who had maintained his own quiet intelligence network within the trust's administrative orbit, was to formalize her leave and appoint an interim director pending the completion of the audit. On the Friday before, Audrey filed a formal notice of evidence preservation with the trust's audit firm and with the Ontario Securities Commission. The notice identified specific documents, specific login records, specific incorporation records for the Alberta company, and the identity of Lionel Croft as a registered agent and beneficial owner. It also attached as a supporting exhibit a notarized summary of the GF Family Trust, its holdings, and its designated beneficiary. By Monday morning, Alderton Crestwood's board of directors had been notified by their own counsel that the situation was substantially more complicated than the initial audit had suggested. They postponed the meeting. Bernard Alderton called her that afternoon. He had not called her in 7 months, not since Christmas, when the family had gathered at the Rosedale house, and she and Reeve had managed to perform, for approximately 3 hours, the version of their marriage that still looked like itself from the outside. "Lane," he said. His voice was careful. "I think we should speak in person." "I agree," she said. "Bring your legal counsel." A silence. "I don't think that's necessary between family," he said. "Bernard," she said, "I'm bringing mine." She did not wait for his answer. She set the time for Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and she hung up. Reeve called her an hour later. She did not answer. She let it ring out, and then she sat in the kitchen, and she looked at the lilac bush through the window. It had already dropped everything for the season. The bare branches were neat and angular against the fence. She thought about Walter Goss Fenwith, sitting in a house in Victoria with a sealed envelope for 19 years. She thought about what it must take to watch something from a distance for that long, knowing you put something in motion, but not knowing if it would ever reach the person it was meant for. She thought about her mother's filing system. She thought about Reeve's face when she had said, "I know." He had not expected her to have information. He had spent years in a marriage with a woman who worked quietly and carefully, and built things that were easy to overlook, and he had come to believe that quiet and overlooked were the same thing. They were not the same thing. The Wednesday meeting was held in Audrey's boardroom on Bay Street, which had been chosen specifically because it was neutral ground, and because it was Audrey's territory, and everyone in that room would feel that. Bernard Alderton arrived with 2 lawyers and with Lionel Croft, which told Lane everything she needed to know about what Bernard thought this meeting was. Reeve arrived separately. He sat across from her, and did not look at her for the first 15 minutes. Philippa Crane was not present, which Lane had expected. Philippa Crane was, according to Ingvar, no longer employed at Alderton Crestwood. Her departure had been announced internally that Tuesday with no explanation given. Audrey opened the meeting without preamble. She laid out the access log evidence. She laid out the phantom vendor evidence. She laid out the Alberta numbered company structure, the Manitoba partnership, the Cayman vehicle. She placed Lionel Croft's name on the document in front of his face. She placed the initials R.A. on the document in front of Reeves' face. Reeves' lawyers objected twice. Audrey acknowledged both objections and continued. Then she placed the summary of the GF Family Trust on the table. She allowed the room enough time to read it. Then she explained, in plain language, that her client was the sole designated beneficiary of a trust holding a controlling interest in Fenwith Capital Partners, which held assets valued at $2.3 billion, and that this information had been in the possession of a notary in British Columbia for 19 years, and that it had now been received, reviewed, and confirmed by independent legal and financial advisors. She paused. "My client has not yet made any decisions about how she will proceed with this matter," Audrey said. "What she has decided is this. She will not be resigning her position as director of the Crestwood Community Housing Trust. She will not be accepting any settlement, and she is prepared to provide the Ontario Securities Commission, the RCMP's Commercial Crime Unit, and the Canada Revenue Agency with the complete file of evidence her team has compiled, unless an alternative resolution is reached that addresses all relevant parties and their conduct." Bernard Alderton's lawyer started to speak. Audrey held up one hand. "What my client wants," she said, "is for the workers, the staff, and the partner organizations that the trust has served for the last 7 years to be protected. The trust's funding must be secured. The housing initiative projects, currently in progress in Scarborough, in Hamilton, and in Peel region, must be completed. Those are the conditions. Those come first. Everything else is secondary." Reeve looked at Lane for the first time since the meeting began. She looked back at him with the same directness she had managed across the dining table on the night he threw the folder. She did not look away. She did not soften it. She let him see what was actually there, which was not anger exactly, but something quieter and more final. Understanding. She had understood this for a while. She had simply been building the record. It took 11 weeks to reach a resolution. Lionel Croft resigned from all advisory positions connected to Alderton Crestwood and its related entities and agreed to cooperate with the OSC investigation. Reeve stepped down from his role as CFO. A forensic audit of Alderton Crestwood's internal accounts confirmed that the pass-through structure had been used to temporarily conceal irregular payments that had originated within the company and not within the trust. The trust was exonerated. The affordable housing projects in Scarborough and Hamilton broke ground the following spring. The Peel region project secured its occupancy permits in June. Lane filed for separation in November. She did not use the word divorce yet. She was not in a hurry. She was 37 years old, and she had always believed that getting things right mattered more than getting them done quickly. She stayed in the house on Elgin Avenue. She watered the lilac bush herself. She hired a new governance director for the trust, a woman named Petra, who came from the Municipal Housing Authority and understood systems the way Lane understood them, from the inside out. She also began the process of familiarizing herself with Fenwith Capital Partners, which was a longer and stranger journey than she had anticipated. Not because it was complicated, but because it required her to hold two things at once: the grief of a relationship she would never have, and the weight of something she had been left without being asked. She read Walter Fenwith's letter 4 times before she put it away in the same safety deposit box on Bloor Street where she had kept the audit records. He had written, near the end of it, that he hoped she had found work that mattered to her, that he had followed the trust from the beginning, that he had read every public report she filed, every community impact statement, every municipal partnership announcement. He wrote that he had wanted many times to reach out and had chosen each time not to because he believed that what she was building was built on its own foundation and that it did not need him in order to stand. She thought that was probably true. She also thought there was something worth honoring in the fact that he had watched long enough to know it. She put the letter away and drove back to Elgin Avenue through the late afternoon traffic on Bloor, past the coffee shop where she'd started most mornings for 4 years, past the dry cleaner that always got her order wrong, past the corner where a developer had put up hoarding around a lot that was supposed to become a condominium tower, but had sat untouched for 2 years. The hoarding faded now and slightly buckled at one corner. She looked at that lot every time she passed it. She already had an idea about what it could become.